I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're exploring a powerful book, a very impactful book. It is called What is Truth? And it's written by a terrific author, T Hakanson. This insightful book equips Christians with the tools needed to defend their faith against skepticism, using logic, scientific law, and biblical truths. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Terry, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Let's start out with the question. I know it's a big question because it's the title of your book, but perhaps you can give us the Reader's Digest version of it. What is truth?
Well, the title itself comes from the day of Christ's crucifixion, when Pilate said to Jesus, "What is truth?" And he kind of said it rhetorically because there wasn't an answer. So that's how the title came about. But What is Truth is a book that will give hope to Christians who have been brought up in a country of Judeo-Christian values that made our nation the strongest, freest, most successful nation in history. And today, people are being bombarded by things that are contrary to what we were brought up believing. And so the purpose of the book is to give people hope and actually ammunition to say, no, the Bible is true. The Bible is as true today as it was for thousands of years. And it also proves it verifies the existence of God. There is a God, and his son is Jesus Christ. And people who realize this and come to Jesus can have eternal life. And so that's what this book is about. And so it's to bolster the faith of believers. And it's also to show skeptics who are seeking for truth that say, wow, this book is actually logical. I could actually be a Christian, and it's not contrary to science. It is compatible with science. So that's the purpose of the book.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the best parts about your book is that religion and science don't have to be in conflict. It doesn't mean you have to choose one over the other. In fact, in your book, you use logic and scientific law to confirm the existence of God. Go through that a little bit, your proofs for the existence of God that you lay out so wonderfully in your book.
Okay, so there are some complicated explanations which delve into philosophy. So the book explains it very, very well for anybody who's never taken philosophy. They can read this and say, wow, this all makes sense. This is logical. But we can look at, I've got an example. Let's say a young couple got married at 20 years old and they bought a safe and they're going to have a retirement fund. And so they lock up the safe and they put it in the corner of the closet and they actually build a wall around it. And 50 years later, they open up the wall and they open up the safe. And what's in the safe? What they put in it? Nothing. And this is the law of thermodynamics of physics. The first law of thermodynamics says that energy is constant. It never gains or loses. It's always constant. In fact, it's spoken of as the most proven law of science. So let's say they opened up that safe and there was $1 million in there. Where did that $1 million come from? Somebody outside of the safe opened up the wall and opened up the safe and put $1 million in it. And that's how our universe began. It was a void. There was nothing. There was no energy. There was no light, no time, no nothing. And from nothing, there will always be nothing, because the law of thermodynamics says energy is constant. It never increases and it never decreases. So we have a universe that has something in it. We can say, just like the safe, where did this something come from? And something outside of the void brought all of the things that we see in the universe into the void and created it. There's only one explanation, something outside of our void, very powerful being, God, created it. And it didn't appear out of nothingness.
Exactly, exactly. It's sort of like if you're walking along the beach and you find a timepiece, a pocket watch, you look at that watch, it's perfectly formatted, it's in sync, it keeps time. What do you realize about that watch? That there must be a watchmaker. When you
Yes.
look around our beautiful universe and you see the order of the planets, the stars, the sun, the moon, the sky, human beings, the miracle of human beings and their creativity, you realize there must be a maker, right?
Yeah, yes, just like there was a watch, and that's one of the arguments in the book too. It's in philosophy, it's called the teleological argument, which means that if there was a watch, we know that with infinite time and space, the sand in the desert didn't become the watch.
Right.
And a
Exactly.
watchmaker made the watch.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because I would look up online on Google and say, how did the universe begin? This is one of the explanations. It says, well, space itself exploded. And they say, well, there was high density and temperature, and space itself exploded. But they don't answer. Well, where did this? How can nothingness explode?
Right. And where did space come from and what was before that?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And a lot of this stuff even answers. Well, this gets into other parts of the book, but
Yeah.
like the three heavens and stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things in the book. I think people are going to find it intriguing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's very, very intriguing. And I think it's great to lay out scientific arguments and logical arguments like this for the existence of God. And tell us a little bit about your own personal history and your journey of redemption and how that influenced the themes in your book.
Well, I committed a horrible crime in the late 1990s, and I hurt someone. And I was not charged with this till 2004. So I had a 4-year interim there where I was reborn with God. I had been baptized. I was very active in a church. And all of a sudden, I was arrested for a crime that was 4 years past. But I had become a new person. During this 4 years' time, I've been collecting a lot of material from sources such as Concerned Women of America, President Beverly LaHaye, and also from Focus on the Family and from news sources. And I had a box full of all these pamphlets and informations and basically on the demise of our society. And I said, oh, I'd like to write a book sometime.
Mm.
And there's a lot of people who say they're going to write a book, but I don't think if I hadn't gone to prison, I probably wouldn't have written the book. So
Mm.
all of a sudden, I found myself in prison, and here I'm a born again Christian. I mean, we had prayer groups. We were baptizing people in prison. I walked through prison, and people who had a crime like me on my left and right are being attacked and stolen. And I walked through prison like Daniel walked in the lion's den.
Mm.
Nobody harmed me. No, never anything. And I bought a typewriter. And for all of the year 2007 and the end of 2006, the beginning of 2008, I never went outside one time, not even for a moment. So when everybody would go out in the yard and stuff, I'd take my typewriter and I'd type and stuff. And then I'd go to the library and get my science books and my encyclopedias. And I've read the Bible many, many times over. And so I wrote this book. And you know, without prison, this book wouldn't exist. So God uses all things, and He says, "You're going to write this book, and now you've got the opportunity." And I wrote it.
Wonderful. You put your time to such great use. It was a time for you to reflect on your faith. And certainly the whole story of Christianity is a redemption story as well. The fact that Christ was crucified and rose from the dead to save us is a redemption story as well. So yours is a
Absolutely.
redemption story, and you should be applauded for using your time in such a great way. Your wonderful wife, I know you recently lost. She was instrumental in helping you put together this book. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I met Linda 10 years ago. Her husband had died in 2011,
Mm.
and she and I had met in 2015, but she's been my parents' pharmacist for 30 years. She's a
Mm.
doctor of pharmacy. Everybody loved Linda.
Mm.
Linda didn't have an enemy in the world. Um, got a funny thing here. I opened the mail yesterday, and there's a speed ticket. She was driving, and they took a camera, and so I've got to pay $100 check for her speeding ticket, and that might be the first ticket she's ever gotten. It was by
Amazing.
camera, and so I just think it's funny. She was a wonderful woman. You know, if if anybody has a friend like Linda was my best friend,
Mm.
they're lucky.
Yeah.
And the day we just got back from a trip from Minnesota, and she was very tired. And I even asked, "Do you need an emergency room?" No, I just want to go to bed. And I later on, she laid on her bed, and I covered her with a blanket, and I kissed her right on the temple here, and it said, "I love you. And when you're done, uh, with your nap, I'm going to run a bath for you and stuff. But I'm going to go unload the trailer." And during that time, she had gotten up to use the restroom, and she had used it and then took a step and she fell over dead. And and you know, it's quite a shock.
Yeah.
But I have this. I know I told her I loved her,
Yeah.
and she knows that I loved her. And some people can say, love is like the wind. We can't see the wind, but we can see the effects of love.
Mm.
People might not see that I love Linda, but they can see how she showed her love to me by she thought of nothing more than me.
Yeah.
We have our own musical group. I go by Joe T. Clayton, and she's Linda. So she's
Hmm.
Joe T. Clayton and Da group.
Hmm.
She was my group. So I lost half my group, but we have all these recordings, and we're actually going to have them on the website. And it's I just want to let people know, if you're really close to somebody and you really appreciate them, don't take them for granted, and
Right.
tell them I love you.
Yeah.
So she died, and I know that I said that to her, and I couldn't be more joyful that
Yeah.
that's our last time together.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you for sharing with us that
Mhm.
story. I'm glad in these last decade you found each other and you had that great love, which is wonderful. And
Yeah,
she's the one who said, "Look at this book. It's terrific. It
I
should be
know.
published."
I
And she
know.
actually went and typed it out on the computer so you'd
Yes.
have a Word file of this so you could
Yes.
submit it to publishers and so forth.
Yeah.
So this is her voice as well.
It is. It is. We're like this, and I've never had a friend like this in my life. I've got a son who I love dearly, and my dad is 93, and he's a wonderful man. But
Mhm.
you don't live with them all day long.
Yeah.
You live with your spouse,
Yeah.
and they're your best friend,
Yeah.
or they're not. And if they're
Right.
not, make them.
Yeah. If you're blessed, she or he is your best friend, and you found your best friend. I have my best friend, and we're blessed to have those people in our lives. Let's turn back to your book for just a
Okay.
second.
Yeah.
And in the book, you dispel some of the common misconceptions about Christianity. Tell us
Yes.
about those.
Well, there's several. One of them that really irks me is the Dark Ages doctrine that people will burn in hell forever. This There's a whole chapter devoted to this, and God is not a tyrant who's going to be who's going to torture people forever, and then not only that, but then put the devil in charge. That's ludicrous. It's like if some mad scientist created a virus and then they put him in charge of trying to cure it. So hell is a doctrine. There, there is no place in the Bible where God says that people will burn forever and ever and ever in hell, and
Mm.
it's just beginning. And this dispels that. That I have bad news and I have good news about hell.
Yeah.
The bad news is there is a hell. The good news, it is not eternal life.
Mm.
And and so that's one of the doctrines. The other one is, well, there's a lot, but if we have time, a lot of people say, what does this all mean about covered by the blood? Covered with the blood, especially non-Christians. What does this mean? And there's a chapter called Blood and the Scarlet Thread, and it
Mhm.
begins in the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve ate of the fruit. And and when they ate of the fruit, they both had shame and guilt, and they saw each other and said, "Wow, we're naked." And they tried to cover each other with, fig leaves,
Mm.
which I looked it up, and it looks kind of like a big maple leaf or something,
Yeah.
or oak. It's not adequate. And so
Right.
God came looking and said, "Where are you?" And they said, "Well, we're hiding because we're naked." And so, and he said, "So did you eat of the tree?" And the man said, "Well, the woman gave me of the fruit, probably not an apple, a very exotic fruit." And and then the woman said, "Well, the serpent tempted me and I ate of the fruit." So all of a sudden they have shame, they have guilt, and they're blaming each other. So this disobedience has caused all this to happen. And so God killed at least two innocent animals. And those animals shed their blood so that their skins could become clothes for Adam and Eve. And this is how blood is required to cover sins. And so this is how the chapter Scarlet Thread talks about this scarlet thread of blood ending in Jesus Christ's crucifixion on the cross, and why we're covered by the blood. And so it explains that sort of thing.
Absolutely. I think there are a lot of mysteries to the Bible and to Scripture that people don't quite understand. They take them too literally. And I think your book does a great job at dispelling those misconceptions, as we mentioned at the beginning. Also, you in your book, you talk a lot about forgiveness. Tell us about how What is Truth guides readers in recognizing their need for forgiveness.
Well, as myself being one of the most forgiven people you've ever interviewed, I
Mm.
mean, I was despicable. If God can save me, he can save anybody. And especially in today's world where all this perversion and sexual sin is going on, there's got to be people who've done things that are so shameful and they're so embarrassed, and their life is darkness. And I'm telling them that if you recognize what sin is, and the Bible will tell you what sin is, and you say, "I am so sorry that I did that, that I will never do that again. I am so sorry." And I ask God, Son, to cover my sins and make me new again.
Mm.
And so anybody can be forgiven of anything except the things that they don't recognize as sin and that they keep doing.
Exactly. You have to ask for forgiveness. You have to seek forgiveness. You have to be contrite, and you should go forth and sin no more.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
what Jesus said to the woman at the well, the
Yeah.
prostitute, or yeah, no, not at the well. It's the one where he was drawing in the sand because they were going to stone this woman for adultery.
Right.
And at the end of it, he says, "Well, I don't condemn you either. Go and sin no more."
Right. Exactly. And that's the secret. We're all sinners. We're born with original sin. It's what we do with our life, what we learn from our mistakes, the right path we put ourselves on, the balance sheet at the end of our life. Have we done more good than bad? I mean, I think that's what really matters. And I think that's really captured in your book. Let's talk a little bit about your background. You're a carpenter, a songwriter, a musician. Has that influenced your writing? Tell us a little bit about that. Has it influenced your faith?
Absolutely. It's the funnest thing in the world that Linda and I would actually play as long as 4 hours a night. And we have
Wow.
professional equipment. We have the beautiful keyboards and all this stuff. And so we actually sing praise songs to God, but that's not the only songs. All music is beautiful. We sing Louis Armstrong's "What a Wonderful World." I see myself, what a wonderful world. And I played a trumpet to that, and I played violin, and Linda plays the piano, and I play the piano. And we open up our windows, and we have a 1 acres in front of our 7-acre house. All the rest is woods. And we have a family of foxes that live on our property, and they come out in the yard and they run around and they wrestle when we're playing music. It is amazing.
That is amazing.
I can look out now and there's probably one fox sitting out in my yard, 20 feet from my steps. And people drive by our house and they're always slowing down because they don't know if they're going to see 1, 2, or 5 foxes in their front yard. And animals just love music. I was playing once in one of my old practice areas. It was a chicken coop that I had a 6-foot door open, and a couple of woodchucks 6 feet in front of the door are out there wrestling and playing with each other while I'm playing music.
Amazing.
Once a bird landed on me.
That sounds like a message from God. A bird lands on you.
I know. So, life right now is very dark because so many lies are being pushed on us, and it's basically propaganda. And I just want to bolster people's faith and let them know, yes, you are going to heaven. Yes, there is a God. And yes, this Bible is as true today as it has been for thousands of years. Don't listen to the propaganda.
In your book, you talk about the timeless truths from the Bible. Tell us about one or two of those.
Well, some of the truths there's a chapter called God's Laws. And, the 10 Commandments, the first 4 commandments. All right, somebody asked Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? And he says, love the Lord your God first and love others as you love yourself. Right there, he consolidated the whole 10 commandments because the first 4 commandments deal with loving God. The last 6 commandments deal with loving other people. So Jesus, in his wisdom, consolidated all of the 10 commandments into 2: love God first, love others as you love yourselves. He didn't say, and love yourself, because we all naturally do love ourselves.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of timeless truths. I just know this is that unless a great creator caused everything, things just didn't appear out of nothingness, like evolution. Exactly. and the false propaganda and doctrines of today are trying to tell us. And people don't need to listen to this. People who are scientifically and rationally minded will realize that, wow, I can be a Christian. Because what takes more faith? To believe that there was absolute nothingness and all of a sudden something spontaneously appeared? Where did it come from? What takes more faith? To believe that everything appeared from absolute nothingness, or that an almighty God created it all?
Yeah. It makes more sense. Creationism actually makes more sense than evolution, when you come down to it. That, like we said in The Watch on the Beach, there has to be a creator. The beauty of a human being, the intricacies of the organs, the brain, the spirit, the soul, the personality, the creativity.
Yes.
Obviously, there was a creator. If you saw, a statue, you'd realize somebody built it. It didn't just get struck by lightning or rocks collided and it turned into a beautiful sculpture that looks exactly like a human being. Yeah. So you absolutely are on the money there and absolutely on target there. Let's talk about the takeaway for readers. What do you hope readers take away from your book?
I want readers to read this book not just once. I read it every day, not because I wrote it, because there's so much in it. Just like I read the Bible every day. I've read it. I don't read it out of duty, because I read it because I love what I'm reading. I just finished reading Esther, and I just loved Esther's one of my favorite people in the whole Bible. And now I've moved on to Job, and God is talking to Satan says, well, look at this Job. Yeah, you give him everything. No wonder he follows you. And he was talking to God, but he was in the third heaven, which is God's heaven. God resides in the Holy of Holies, which as represented in the temple of the earth, and no sin is allowed there. So God came out to the outer courts when he was talking to Satan, because no sin is allowed in the Holy of Holies.
Mm-hmm.
And so the book explains, there's a chapter called The Three Heavens. The third heaven is God's heaven. And the first heaven or realm is where we live. And it includes all things of length, width, and height. And when you have something of matter, all of a sudden you can say, how long has that matter existed? And all of a sudden you have time. So we live in the first heaven, which is 4 dimensions of length, width, height, and time. And our world includes all material and things all the way to the very farthest star of the universe. Everything is the first realm or the first heaven is where we live.
Yeah.
And God lives in the third heaven, and it talks about the third heaven. Paul talks about the third heaven in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, and it's also mentioned in Revelation. And so if there's a first and the third heaven, there's naturally a middle heaven. Mm-hmm. And the middle heaven is the 5th dimension of spirit beings. It's angels and demons. And they can travel between all 3 heavens, but they can't go into the Holy of Holies, except certain holy angels. But no sin is ever allowed into the Holy of Holies, the throne room of God. And so the book talks about the 3 heavens. A lot of people aren't even aware of it. When I heard a sermon on it 20 years ago, I thought, this is amazing. And so I really started researching it, and it all makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And this world is so beautiful. It really is a first heaven. I mean, look out your window. Like you said, you look out to an acre, you see the foxes playing, you see the birds, you see the sun, you see the sky. I mean, heaven is all around us. We have to embrace it. I mean, there is something to existentialism as well. And this existence is very much like a heaven, if you make it a heaven, depending on who you surround yourself with, what you make of this life, what you contribute, how you help others, what you view, and how you process it all. And if you have a negative outlook, it's going to look like hell out there. If you have a positive, sunny Christian outlook, it's going to look like heaven out there.
Yes.
And so I love that concept of the 3 heavens. I think it's beautiful. Terry, thank you so much for joining us here today. Let me just tell the folks at home one more time about the book. It's called What is Truth? It's written by Terry Hakanson. It is an insightful book. It is a book that equips Christians with the tools to defend their faith against skepticism, using logic, scientific law, and biblical truths. It is a powerful journey of faith, redemption, and unshakable belief in an almighty God. It is a wonderful read. As Terry mentioned earlier, this could be a daily devotional for you where you just open up and read a chapter or a few passages and reflect upon it, the meaning of the words, the meaning in your life, how it can empower you, your relationship with God, your relationship with the people around you. Another thing that Terry said today that was very, very impactful were the last words that he said to his beautiful wife, which were, I love you. Remind yourself to say, I love you, and take those seconds out of your life to show that you care and give them that kiss on the forehead to let them know that you cherish them, because this life, unfortunately, does turn on a dime. And you need your faith to shield you in that sudden misfortune, and you need to know that you've done all you can on this earth. Terry, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you very much, Logan. I appreciate the time.
I appreciate your time, sir.
And I also appreciate your song, Breathe. People should watch it. It's an uplifting song. Lay down your burdens and breathe and watch these beautiful young Christian people making their soapbox cars. And I think you're riding one of them, aren't you?
What's that, sir?
I think you're riding on one of them in the video, aren't you?
I think so, yep.
Make a cameo appearance.
Absolutely, absolutely. Great talking to you today, Terry. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time, this time until next time on Spotlight.